Good afternoon. This is Dr. Havens with our Chapter 8 lecture, Resolving Problems and Conflict. In this chapter, we're going to teach you how to identify common sources of conflict in the workplace, how to guide employees or small groups through a process of conflict resolution, how to participate in negotiations, and also we will touch just a little bit on the purposes of collective bargaining. There is no such thing, as I'm sure you've discovered, as a conflict-free relationship. Friends, family, co-workers, we will always have a time when we disagree with someone because no two people think alike. So conflict is a part of daily lives. Usually it's manageable, but in the workplace it becomes an issue when it can interfere with getting the work done. So serious or ongoing conflicts in the workplace can be very stressful. They can make the work difficult. Symptoms of stress include difficulty sleeping, anxiety, feeling sad or upset, problems concentrating, and social withdrawal. Other interpersonal problems, such as getting along with coworkers, can occur. Feelings of anger or bitterness or rage or sometimes even violence can happen in the workplace if there's no attempt or achievement of conflict resolution. And this is definitely a situation to be avoided. Workplace violence is kind of a common thing in the workplace. However, dealing with conflict and learning to successfully resolve it can be a positive experience. If you can learn constructively how to cooperate, how to compromise, and how to see the other person's point of view, this can be a very empowering situation. In the long run, most coworkers have similar concerns and needs to ours. Sometimes it seems that they are trying to block our progress or compete with us in the workplace, but if you think about it, what would be their motivation to do this? We all have a common goal of taking care of patients and getting the work done. So the goal of conflict resolution then is to create an environment where people know how to cooperate and resolve differences of opinion in a constructive manner rather than being competitive and destructive. It needs to be a win-win situation. One problem that's unique to the healthcare profession has to do with the differences in status and authority in relationship to all other non-physician workers by the physicians. Physicians consider themselves to be at the top of the food chain. Sometimes they are not terribly collegial with the rest of the team, and they may disregard the opinions or input from other members of the healthcare team, as well as refuse to engage in conflict resolution. The most common problem from physicians would be incivility or speaking to nurses and other healthcare workers, maybe with disrespect, maybe being sarcastic, finger pointing, and other behaviors that you would not think of as being acceptable in the workplace. There is also considerable incivility towards nurses from fellow nurses. This is an especially significant problem in healthcare because the seasoned nurses are the most important source of support and guidance for new graduates. There's an old saying, I'm sure you've heard, that nurses eat their young, and this is a form of incivility that we're talking about today. So one particular source of workplace conflict is workplace bullying, or what we call nurse-to-nurse lateral violence. So bullying is an attempt to exert power over someone. It's more than just being overly demanding and telling someone what to do, having very high expectations for them. Workplace bullies often single out somebody as their target. It may be somebody new, somebody who's overly agreeable, someone who's not terribly assertive, and it has a degree of personal malice against this individual. The effect on the person we call the target can be devastating in terms of anxiety, depression, maybe even suicidal feelings, wanting to quit the job, wanting to file a lawsuit against the organization, and so on and so forth. So the cost to the organization from a bully can be tremendous. One recent Gallup poll revealed that 1 in 2 adults in the U.S. had left their jobs to get away from a bullying manager. This is a fairly significant problem in the nursing profession. We need to be aware of it so that we can deal with it and stop this lateral violence against one another. Excuse me. At the Shands at UF healthcare facility, the average length of stay of a registered nurse is 3 years. So there's very high turnover. People seem to be dissatisfied with their positions. It costs approximately $60,000 to recruit one registered nurse from the time he or she submits their online application to the time they have the interview, all the paperwork, references, everything is done, and from the time that person is oriented and added to the payroll. $60,000 has been spent by the hospital. So the cost of turnover in nursing positions is just huge. This adds to the cost of our health care. Conflict can occur anywhere and between any different number of people, 2 people, a few people, or lots of people. On an individual level, it can happen between 2 people that are on a team, such as 2 nurses that work on the same unit or in the same department, maybe in different departments, or between a nurse or other staff member. There could be conflict with a patient or with 1 or more family members of that patient even. At a group level, sometimes there's conflict in the workplace between 2 departments or 2 teams or 2 professional groups. We call this turf wars often. An example of this would be who's responsible for the advanced care planning, for getting the advanced directives. Is it the social worker or the nurse? How do you know when it's necessary to have conflict resolution? Conflict happens all the time, so how do you know when it's identified as at a level where you need conflict resolution? One sign may be when you feel very uncomfortable in a situation, when you dread going into work, or when you dread being around a certain person. There's conflict and stress on every job, but there need to be more good days than bad. When you're feeling bad or feeling off a whole lot of the time, usually that's a sign that there's some conflict that needs to be resolved. You'll also know it's time for conflict resolution when members of the team are having difficulty working together or relating to one another, and this causes a lot of stress. Sometimes it may be time for conflict resolution when you notice that members of the team are not speaking to one another, or maybe you're one of the people involved in this conflict, someone's not speaking to you, or when people begin losing their cool or start escalating or attacking one another verbally. That's usually a sign that there's going to need to be a conflict resolution intervention. So what do we do to identify the problem, which is the first step in getting it resolved? Early recognition or speaking up sooner than later is probably the best course of action. There's always someone that you can talk to and say, hey, I think I'm having a problem. Someone may have their feelings hurt. Maybe there's tension between us. Can you just hear me out for a minute and give me your opinion and tell me what you think about the situation? You don't want to let this go on too long. You don't want to get chronically exhausted, dread going to work. You don't want it to lead to disruptive behavior or even mistrust. if we can't trust our coworkers, who can we trust? So we need to be able to get along for the good of effective patient care. Once a conflict has been identified, when a person comes out and says, hey, I'm really mad at you or really having a problem with you, and then you say, yes, I agree, I think I'm having a problem with you, it's important to that people speak to each other in a non-threatening manner. Don't let this escalate. Ask the person what they want. It may be fairly easy to resolve. If you're working on a nursing unit in a hospital or long-term care facility, it may be as simple as someone will come out and say, well, you always get the patient assignment that's closer to the nurse's station, and I'm always trotting to the end of the hall. And if it's not anything more difficult than that, it may be that you'd say, oh my gosh, I had no idea you felt that way, and I never noticed. I agree, when I look at the room numbers, maybe this is a little unfair, and I will be happy to take the 2 patients in the room that are down at the end of the hall tonight. Problem solved. So when it's as simple as that, it may be just something that this coworker had put off discussing with you because they didn't want to hurt your feelings and they didn't want to create a conflict. So they've been stewing and brewing about it, and now it's come out, and it can be easily resolved without it being emotionally charged. However, sometimes issues are more serious, they go deeper, and they are emotionally charged. So there's going to have to be deeper exploration before the real problem can be identified. So this is a diagram of problem conflict resolution, and I apologize for all the clicking on this recording. I've got a mouse problem. My mouse is not working effectively, so please hang in there with me. We're almost done with this chapter. So in this diagram, you begin at the top, you identify the problem, spell it out, be candid and frank and say what's really on your mind. Also, be ready to propose a possible solution. The 2 people or everyone involved should discuss these propositions, choose the best solution, make a plan to implement it, to change the nursing assignment or whatever is going to make all the participants happy. Resolve the problem. If it doesn't, if somebody still has an axe to grind or they're still not satisfied, then basically you repeat the process. Getting to the root of the problem can sometimes be the most time-consuming part of conflict management, because issues may go deeper than what appears to be happening at the current time. People are sometimes reluctant or very vague when discussing their problems or getting to what we would call what's really happening. Many people, I think especially women, are very conflict avoidant, and we're afraid that we will make the situation worse if we come out and say what's really bothering us. Sometimes people will rationalize, and they will give an explanation for the problem that's a good reason for the problem, but not the real reason, for a variety of reasons that they may not want to really get to the root of the problem. A case in point is I have a friend here in Gainesville, an elderly woman. I've known her for many years, and she recently moved to a retirement community where people live in apartments kind of in close quarters, and they have to get along. She called me up and said that she wanted to move out of the community because they spray a lot of pesticides and herbicides on the lawn. In an effort to keep things nice. They want to keep bugs and weeds out of the grass, basically. And she said that her little dog had not been feeling well recently after having walked on the grass and being exposed to chemicals, and that's the reason that she wanted to move out. Upon exploring this with her a little deeper, it seemed that what's really happening is it is about the dog, but it's more about some negative feedback that she received from neighbors about not liking the dog. Some of them aren't dog people or dog friendly. When they cross paths with her when she's walking the dog on the sidewalk, they don't want to have to stop and pet the dog or greet the dog. They don't like hearing the dog bark, and they don't like being around the dog all the time. So her feelings were very hurt. She likes to have the dog with her most of the time, but it took a little while. It took a lengthy conversation for us to get to the root of the problem and then assess whether she wants to handle it a different way or if she really wants to move out of the community. So Likewise, this can happen with workplace concerns. It takes a while for people really to admit what it is that is bothering them, and that's fairly normal. So strong personal beliefs, miscommunication, ambiguity about job duties, physical exhaustion can all create factors that can exacerbate a conflict and divert our attention, unfortunately, from our patient care priorities. So it's going to take some time, maybe more than one meeting, but all of this needs to get sorted out so that a solution can be found. So how are we going to generate solutions in that part of the graph that we just looked at, where we have to come up with solutions for the problem? The first thing to do is to discourage the participants from using old solutions for new problems. In nursing, the solution is sometimes to change jobs. There's a nursing shortage, and nurses can just about always move to a new floor, a new unit, a new facility, or a new part of town and always be employed. But there's the old saying that wherever you go, there you are. So rather than changing jobs again, maybe it would be a good thing to stay put and try to work this out with the people that you're with. So the group should come together, or whoever the participants are in this process, they should have paper and a pencil, and they should write down positive solutions with I statements, not focusing on the other person. You do this, you always don't do this, you treat me like this. Focus on how I'm feeling and how this is affecting me, and try not to place blame. Keeping an open mind throughout this process and trying to think outside the box and find creative solutions may be the best way to handle the situation. Usually the best solutions are going to come from those closest to the problem and not someone who is only peripherally involved in it. However, it's going to take a combination of suggestions to resolve the problem. It's going to involve compromise. Not everybody is going to get all of what they want, but moving forward, there has to be consensus, and it has to be agreeable to most people who are involved in the situation and have to live with the outcome. So here are some tips for engaging in this discussion of problem solving. Make sure it's a comfortable climate where everyone has a comfortable seat at the table. Make sure you state the purpose of the meeting. Freely admit your own contribution to the problem. Don't make it all about you, and the other person. Present the facts. Recognize and express your own emotional response to the situation. Set some ground rules about taking turns speaking and being fair. Don't make personal remarks or assess blame on the other person. Make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, maybe pass the talking stick or set some other ground rule. Speak for yourself, don't speak for anybody else. Make sure that the discussion is goal-directed and focus on solutions and not just ruminating about the problem. And always keep an open mind and be kind. So conflict is inevitable. It's always going to happen from time to time in the workplace, but every storm comes to an end, and then the sun comes out again. Conflict doesn't have to be destructive. It doesn't have to be entirely negative. For that matter, it can be handled skillfully. There are things you can do to foresee problems and prevent conflict. And there should always be a collaborative approach to problem solving. Everybody should have a chance to participate in the process, and that way coworkers can learn more about each other and actually strengthen their relationships. So resolving conflict, when well done, can lead to better working relationships and also more creative ways of operating and getting the work done and taking good care of our patients.